everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. You probably know the feeling of writing a line using all the right arpeggios, the target notes, it's moving forward, and when you play it, it still doesn't really sound that great. In fact, it doesn't really sound like jazz at all. At least that's something that I remember having had troubles with once in a while when I was studying. And there are actually some rules about what makes a great jazz line and what doesn't really work as a great jazz line. So in this video, I'm going to cover one rule that you really need to check out for this. I'm going to cover some examples of how you implement that into your lines, how you use that when you're writing something. And I'm also going to go over an example of Wes Montgomery because he really gets this right. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, improve the way that you solo, check out some interesting arpeggios or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. First, I'm going to cover how to construct lines that are easier to phrase well and get to sound good. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get this into your playing through listening to other people and hearing it in your own playing. I'm going to do that by covering a few bars from a Wes Montgomery solo. This is really about how you phrase your eighth note lines. And especially it's about where you put the accents in the eighth note lines. And this first example is actually an example of a line that doesn't really work in that respect. Because here the harmony is clear, it's clearly D minor, G7, C major 7, and we're hitting all the chord tones in the right place. But at the same time, the line and the melody doesn't really pop. We can't really put any nice accents. Because what we have here is phrasing-wise this, I guess. So do. Everything's on the beat. Everything is heavy. It sounds more like Megadeth than it sounds like Charlie Parker. If you think about how a Charlie Parker line sounds or how a bebop line should sound, then you're probably coming up with something that's more like bebop. So I use sort of singing as a reference here because I think very often, even without thinking about it, if you start trying to improvise some rhythm on top of a tempo, then you already have an idea about what it's supposed to sound like, and you just need to tap into that when you're trying to come up with lines. In the example where I was singing a phrase that sounded more like bebop, then if you slow it down, you can hear that the accents I'm doing, so you can hear that the line is really just a flow of 8 notes, and then some notes are sort of popping out and are getting an accent. And even when you can't hear what notes I'm singing, that's just the main idea of what is happening. And that's really what makes it sound like a bebop phrase. So we need to figure out how to construct melodies where we naturally can put those accents on the offbeat within the bar. Let's just take a look at a few examples. I'm just going to do some examples on a C major 7 and then show you how you can easily add those types of accents to your lines. The rule that I'm using here is actually quite simple. Melodically, what has to happen is that we want to have a high note on the offbeat, and that means that it has to be higher than the note that follows it. And that's what I'm doing in this example as well. I'm starting on the B, going up to the C, and then the next note after the C, because I want to give the C an accent, then the next note has to be lower, so I'm going down to B, and then just continuing down the arpeggio. So this is really just a C major 7 arpeggio. And then, and I have an accent on the one end, right? And then I can do a similar idea here where I skip up to A, and I can give that an accent, and then go down to the G, and then further down an A minor arpeggio. So A minor 7, and then ending the line on the D. And we can do the same, but then try to get an accent on the 2 end and on the 4 end instead of just on the 1 end and on the 3 end. And here I'm doing that by first playing a C major 7 arpeggio. So if I want to create it so that I want to have an accent on the B, that means that the next note I play after the B has to be lower. And I'm pulling off down to an A. And that gives us that accent. And notice that when I'm doing this, and that's happening throughout all these examples, I'm staying in one position, so it's only gonna be pull-offs and hammer-ons I can do this. And actually, in this case, because I'm moving down, it's only gonna be pull-offs. You can also do this with slides, but the idea is that I'm using legato to get the accent, and I'm doing that by picking the note that needs an accent, like the B here, and then pulling off to the A, because that's naturally gonna make the A a little bit softer, and it's gonna help the B stand out. So that's the accent on the B. If I then continue from the A, I move up the scale, and then up to E, pulling off down to D, so that gives the E an accent. And then just finishing the line with this fragment where I'm ending on the 2-and on the G. And here I'm mixing it up a little bit. So first we get an accent on the 2-and, so I'm really just starting on the G, and then I'm playing this sort of G major chord-tone pattern, pulling off from the high D down to a B on the 3rd beat. So there we get an accent. And then I'm adding an accent on the 3-and as well by playing the A and pulling off to the G. So down to the E, C, and then from E to D with a pull off, which gives me an accent on the 1-and, and then ending on the B. And of course you can do the same with the 2-5-1 like I'm doing in this example. So the first part is just an enclosure of the root of the 2 chord, the D. So E and C sharp down to the D, then up the scale, skipping up to C, and then I can pull off to B on the G7, and that way I'm creating an accent on the C. And then moving up further through the G7 arpeggio, so D, F, G. And here the G is a note I can give an accent because the next one is an F. So then further down the scale, skipping up to A. And again, A is a high note, so it's higher than the G that I'm resolving to, and I can use a pull off for that. And then ending on an E. The reason that I can keep on publishing videos every week is that I have a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for their support, and it's because of that that I can keep on making all these very specific jazz guitar and music theory videos. So if you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. If you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. Besides knowing the rules and knowing how you can construct phrases that sound good like this, it's also important that you start working on recognizing it in the music that you're listening to, so that you just get it into your ears and in that way get into your system. Because in the end, you cannot think about phrasing when you're trying to solo. This has to be something that's really just in your system and that just comes out naturally and is already in the lines that you're playing. Otherwise, if you have to think of it while you're playing, then you're probably not going to be able to play anything that makes any sense. So now I'm just going to take a look at this fragment from a Wes Montgomery solo. So this is just the opening phrase of his solo on 4 and 6 of the Smoking at the Half Note album. He starts with really just sort of a blues phrase, which is like this sliding G and D up to and that's half notes, that there's no accents involved in this. That's also something that's kind of clear about, especially Wes's playing, is that sometimes he'll play phrases that are really sparse, and then you don't have all the 8 notes and all the accents. You don't have to worry too much about it. At the same time, the next phrase that he plays is really clearly, even though it is like G minor pentatonic or G minor blues, it's clearly a line that has that accent, because we get not an accent on the B flat but on the C, and especially also he's using the pull off, so and then adding the D afterwards. Then the next part is just a G minor 11 arpeggio. The first part doesn't really have any accents up to the 11, and then we just get this phrase where we get the accent on the 3-and. And if you listen to this and if you try to play along with solos that you know, and in that way try to copy their phrasing, then it's going to get a lot easier for you to get this into your playing. So one part of this is understanding how it works and figuring out why some of the lines that you are making doesn't work and give you a way to fix it. And the other part of this is really trying to imitate solos and trying to recognize good phrasing in the solos that you're listening to, because once you're aware of it, you can start getting it into your own playing, but you need to be able to hear it, and you also need to notice it. If you want to check out another video on the great phrasing of Wes Montgomery, and also how he is really extraordinarily good at constructing melodies within his solos, then check out this video where I'm analyzing a few lines from some later passages in this solo on 4 and 6. If this is the first time you see one of my videos and you want to learn more about jazz guitar, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next time.